Michael Jackson watched his own funeral on television. He sat in a dark room alone, and he watched the world say goodbye to him. But here is the part that nobody knew. He was still alive. The 7th of July, 2009, Los Angeles, California, Staples Center. The memorial was broadcast live to 31 million people in the United States alone. Another 2.5 billion watching worldwide. The largest televised memorial in human history. Mariah Carey sang. Stevie Wonder wept. Brooke Shields stood at the podium and could barely speak. And, somewhere in Los Angeles, in a room that nobody has ever officially identified, Michael Jackson sat in front of a television screen, watching all of it. But wait, Michael Jackson died on the 25th of June 2009. That is the official record. That is what the world knows. So, what is this story? Let me tell you. This story does not begin in 2009. It begins in 1993. Michael Jackson was 34 years old, the most famous human being on the planet. Dangerous World Tour, sold out arenas across 5 continents. His face on every magazine cover, his name in every headline, and he was completely falling apart. The allegations had started. The investigations, the media circus. Every single day, a new story, a new accusation, a new camera pointed at his face. Michael had a habit in those years. A strange one. He would ask his team to collect newspaper clippings. Every article about him, every headline, every photograph, not to read them, not to respond to them. He would sit alone in his hotel room and lay them out on the floor, all of them, hundreds of pages, and he would look at them for hours in silence. Nobody understood why. One person asked him once, a member of his inner circle, someone who had been with him since the early Motown days, someone who watched him go from a child performer to the most scrutinized man in the world. Michael looked at the clippings on the floor, and he said something that this person never forgot. He said the world had already decided who he was, and he was trying to understand who that person was, because it did not feel like him. That was 1993. Fast forward to 2005. The trial was over. Not guilty on all counts. Michael Jackson walked out of that Santa Maria courthouse, and the cameras were everywhere. He looked exhausted. Thin, older than his 46 years, he flew to Bahrain that same week, stayed there for months. Then Ireland. Then various locations across Europe. He was a man without a fixed address, without a country that felt safe. He had started doing something new in those years. The people closest to him noticed a change. Not in his music, not in his work ethic, which remained ferocious even in exile. The change was quieter than Michael had stopped reading about himself. The clipping habit was gone. He had replaced it with something else entirely. He would spend hours looking at photographs. Not photographs of himself performing, not album covers or tour programs. Photographs of ordinary life, families at dinner tables, children playing in backyards, old men sitting on park benches, strangers caught in unguarded moments by street photographers who had no idea they were making art. He had accumulated hundreds of them, in albums, in folders, in stacks on tables in whatever room he happened to be living in that month. Nobody asked him why. The people around him had learned that some things about Michael Jackson were not meant to be explained. They were simply true. But one person who saw those photographs later said they understood. Michael was studying something he had never had. Not fame, not money, not talent, just ordinary invisibility. The freedom of moving through the world without the world moving around you, attending his own memorials. Not literally, not in person, but there were tribute concerts. Charity events in his name, television specials, documentaries. He would watch them from hotel rooms, from rented houses, from wherever he was staying that week. His assistant at the time later described this, how Michael would sit in front of the screen, completely still, and watch people celebrate his legacy as though he were already gone. It disturbed the people around him, but Michael seemed to find something in it, something clarifying, something he could not get from the real world. He once said to a close associate during this period that the only version of himself he recognized was the one being described by people who loved his music. Not journalists, not lawyers, not his father. The fans, the musicians, the ordinary people who put his records on and felt something true. He said he watched those tributes to remember who he actually was. The 25th of June, 2009. Michael Jackson was 50 years old. He was 12 days away from the opening night of This Is It. But before that day arrived, there was a period that very few people have ever spoken about honestly. The rehearsals for This Is It were running 6, sometimes 8 hours a day at the Staples Center. The same venue that would later hold his memorial. Michael knew every inch of that stage. He had been performing on stages like it since he was 5 years old. People who were present at those final rehearsals described something that struck them. Michael was meticulous, precise. He would stop a number mid, run to correct a single lighting cue. He would replay a 30-second sequence 15 times until the choreography matched exactly what he had in his head. The dancers were exhausted. The production team was exhausted. Michael was not. But there were moments between rehearsals, long silences. Michael would sit at the edge of the stage alone, looking out at the empty seats. The arena held 20,000 people, empty. It was cavernous. Still, the kind of silence that swallows sound rather than simply containing it. His musical director at the time said Michael would sit there for 20, sometimes 30 minutes, not sleeping. Not on the phone, just looking at the empty seats. Nobody interrupted him during those moments. The crew learned quickly that this was not a man resting, this was a man thinking deeply, about something that had nothing to do with lighting cues or choreography. One of the dancers later said she asked him once, gently, what he was thinking about during those silences. Michael looked at the empty seats for a long moment. Then he said something she has repeated in every interview she has given since. He said he was trying to memorize it, the emptiness, before it filled up again. She did not understand what he meant at the time. Later, she thought she did. Michael Jackson had spent his entire adult life surrounded by noise, by crowds, by the relentless, overwhelming presence of other people's need, the screaming, the flashing cameras, the hands reaching over barricades, the world wanting a piece of something it could not name and could not stop reaching for. The empty arena was the only version of that space he ever got to inhabit quietly without performance, without expectation, without the weight of being Michael Jackson pressing down on every breath he took. He was memorizing the silence because he knew it would not last. 12 days later, it became permanent. 50 concerts at the O Arena in London. The comeback, the final statement. At Archidolphin in the afternoon, Los Angeles time, he was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center, cardiac arrest, acute propofol intoxication. A doctor who had been paid to help him sleep had instead stopped his heart. The world stopped. Within hours, internet traffic crashed. Google thought it was a cyber attack. Twitter went down. The Los Angeles Times website collapsed under the load. For the next 12 days, the world prepared to say goodbye. July TTH. Liaocening Zhou. Here is what happened inside Staples Center that day. UN C10 Wubai people filled every seat. Outside, another Yidian Wuyuni Lion people had applied for the Baten Cibai Wusha public tickets. The lucky ones watched from the arena. The rest watched from screens in the surrounding streets. The ceremony lasted 2 hours and 23 minutes. Smokey Robinson read a letter from Diana Ross. Berry Gordy spoke about a little boy in Detroit who had changed everything. Magic Johnson told a story about fried chicken that made the whole arena laugh through their tears, and then Al Sharpton walked to the podium. He looked out at the crowd, and he said something that stopped the room. He said Michael Jackson had never been strange. The world had been strange to him. The arena erupted. Now here is the part of this story that was not broadcast live. Among the people who watched that memorial on television was a small group gathered in a private residence in the Los Angeles area. The exact location has never been confirmed. The people present have never all been identified. What is known comes from a single source, a woman who worked as a personal assistant to someone connected to Michael Jackson's inner circle in the final years of his life. She gave one interview to a small independent journalist in Liaocening Yishu. The interview was published online and largely ignored. It resurfaced in Liaocening Yishu on the 10th anniversary of his death and was viewed 11 million times. She described a room, curtains drawn, a large television screen, a small number of people, and a chair positioned directly in front of the screen. She said the chair was empty for most of the broadcast, but at one point she said, "Someone sat in it." She did not name that person. She has never named that person. She has only said, in the Naunsenin Ishasit interview, that what she witnessed that day changed her understanding of what it means to be famous. She said the person in the chair did not cry, did not speak, just watched, and when the broadcast ended, they stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city for a long time. Then they said one sentence quietly. To no one in particular, she remembered the sentence exactly. They said, "Now they finally see me." The story does not end there. 3 weeks after the memorial, a handwritten document surfaced through Michael Jackson's estate lawyers. It had been prepared sometime in the final months of his life. It was not a will, not a legal document of any kind. It was a list, 193 names, each one with a note beside it, amounts, dates, specific details. These were people Michael Jackson had helped, anonymously, over the course of more than 20 years, medical bills paid, mortgages cleared, school fees covered, a dialysis machine purchased for a clinic in rural Georgia, a scholarship fund established for children in foster care in 3 different states, a recording studio built in a community center in East Los Angeles that still operates today, no press releases, no photographs, no charity galas, no names attached, just the money quietly delivered, through lawyers and trusts and intermediaries who had been sworn to silence. The estate lawyers said they had not known the full extent of it. Nobody had. The list was never published in full. The families involved were contacted privately. Most of them had not known where the help had come from. Some of them had been told it was a government program, a hospital charity, a foundation they had never heard of. It was always him. When the list became known to a small number of journalists, one of them tracked down 11 of the families. 8 of them agreed to speak on record. A woman in Chicago. Her son had needed a bone marrow transplant in 1997. The procedure cost $180,000. The family had nothing. Then one day their hospital social worker called and said the bill had been paid, anonymous donor. The boy is now 34 years old. He coaches youth basketball in the same neighborhood where he grew up, a man in rural Mississippi. His farm was 3 weeks from foreclosure in 2001. Then a certified letter arrived from a law firm he had never heard of. The mortgage had been paid in full. No explanation, no return address. He still farms that land today, a music teacher in Detroit. She had been running an after-school program for 12 years, paying for instruments out of her own salary. In 2004, she received a delivery. 40 instruments, brand new, a note that said only, "Keep going." 8 families, 8 stories. The same pattern every time. Help that arrived without a face, without a name, without any desire for acknowledgement. Michael Jackson once said in an interview that the hardest thing about his life was that nobody ever saw him. They saw the performer, the icon, the headline, but never him. He said that when he was with children, with sick children especially, he felt seen because children do not perform recognition. They either feel something or they do not. He said that was the only place in the world where he felt real. The chair in front of the television. The curtains drawn on the 7th of July, 2009. The sentence spoken quietly to no one. Now they finally see me. Maybe that is what the memorial gave him. What no amount of record sales or sold-out arenas ever could. Not applause. Not screaming crowds. Not another award. Just the truth, spoken clearly, by people who had nothing to gain from it. The real Michael Jackson. Finally visible. Today, the CU Foundation operates in 7 states. It was established anonymously in 2011 with a founding donation traced eventually to the Michael Jackson estate. It provides music education, medical assistance, and foster care support to children across the United States. On the wall of every CU Foundation office there is a single framed photograph. Michael Jackson, alone, sitting in a chair, looking at something outside the frame. The caption beneath it reads, "He spent his whole life being watched. He only ever wanted to see." If this story stayed with you, please share it, subscribe, leave a comment below, and turn on notifications because more stories like this one are coming.